Welcome, everyone. This is Thomas and Jennifer.
We're back after a break, and it feels great to be here again.
Are you ready to dive into some ancient Egyptian mythology today?
Always ready for a good myth.
Me too, especially when it comes to a god like Ra, the mighty sun god.
Ah, yes, Ra, a pretty major figure in the Egyptian pantheon.
He wasn't just major, he was the top god, the king of the gods, the creator of everything, the source of all life.
You're right. It's kind of hard to overstate his importance.
I know. We've got some amazing excerpts from ancient texts. And honestly, some of the stories they tell about Ra, just wow.
Well, let's not keep our listeners waiting. What's the mission for today's deep dive? Where should we even begin with a god as multifaceted as Ra?
Good question. I think we should start by really understanding just how deeply Ra was woven into every aspect of ancient Egyptian life.
Okay, I like that. It wasn't just about religion, right? It was about their entire worldview.
Exactly. Their culture, their understanding of the universe, everything revolved around Ra.
Kind of like how our lives revolve around the sun, even if we don't always think about it.
That's a great analogy. It's hard to imagine life without the sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for the ancient Egyptians, Ra was the sun.
Makes sense. So he's this all-powerful god, the source of everything. Where does his story even begin?
Well, our sources tell us that Ra first pops up around the Second Dynasty, which is pretty early on in Egyptian history.
So he's been around for a while. What's in a name? What does Ra even mean?
You know, it's really interesting. His name literally translates to sun in ancient Egyptian.
No kidding. That's pretty straightforward.
Right. It's like they wanted to make it crystal clear who was in charge. No need for fancy titles or hidden meanings. He is the sun.
I guess when you're the source of all light and life, you don't need a complicated name.
Exactly. Okay, but names aside, we can't forget Ra's iconic look. That instantly recognizable falcon-headed man with the solar disk crown.
Oh, yeah. Talk about a powerful image. You see that, and you know exactly who you're dealing with.
Right. But why a falcon? And what's with the solar disk? What were the ancient Egyptians trying to convey?
Well, the falcon was a symbol of power and divinity, soaring high above everything, just like the sun.
So they're visually linking Ra to the most dominant force in their world.
Exactly. And that radiant solar disk, well, that's obviously a symbol of the sun itself, radiating light and warmth.
It's like a visual language.
Yeah.
Instantly connecting Ra to these concepts of power, light, and life.
You got it. Everyone understood what those images meant, even if they couldn't read hieroglyphs. It's powerful stuff.
It really is. Okay, so we've got the name, the look. Now let's delve into the family drama. Because Ra's family tree, well, it's something else.
Buckle up. It's about to get wild. Where do we even begin?
Let's start with the Heliopolitan creation myth. Have you heard of it?
Of course. It's one of the most important Egyptian creation myths, and it all starts with Adam-Ra.
Adam-Ra. Okay, so not just Ra, it's Adam-Ra. What's going on here?
It's a bit complicated, but basically Adam-Ra is this sort of primordial creator god who emerges from the waters of Nun.
Nun. Okay, so who or what is Nun?
Picture this. Nun is like this swirling, chaotic abyss, a void before anything existed.
Okay, so Nun is like the primordial soup, the ultimate chaos before creation.
Exactly. And then, from this chaos, boom, Adam-Ra emerges.
Talk about a dramatic entrance. So how does Adam-Ra get the whole creation thing going? How does he bring order out of this chaos?
Well, there are a couple of different versions of the myth, and to be honest, they're a bit out there.
Out there how?
One version involves divine self-sufficiency, if you will.
Okay, not sure I follow.
Let's just say Adam-Ra got creative with his powers.
Oh, I see. And the other version?
The other version describes him spitting out the first gods, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture.
He spat them out, like literally spat.
Literally spat. I know it sounds a bit strange to us, but remember, this is ancient Egyptian mythology.
Different time, different culture, different ideas about creation. I guess it's memorable.
It definitely makes you think. So we've got Shu and Tefnut, the first divine offspring. Where does it go from there?
From there, things get even more interesting. Shu and Tefnut get together and create Geb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess.
Oh, yeah, Geb and Nut. And then they have some pretty famous kids of their own.
Right. Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. It's like the original divine family drama.
It really is. Intrigue, betrayal, love, power struggles, the whole 9 yards.
So we've got this whole crew of gods and goddesses, and they're known as the Ennead of Heliopolis.
Right. The 9 most powerful gods in the Egyptian pantheon.
And of course, sitting at the head of this table is Ra, solidifying his role as the ultimate patriarch, the progenitor of the universe.
It all goes back to Ra, the source of everything. It's like a cosmic family tree with him at the very top.
Okay, so we've got Ra, top god, with a family tree that would make even the most complicated soap opera look tame. But how did he actually create the world? Did he get his hands dirty?
Not exactly. The ancient Egyptians believed that Ra created the world simply through the power of his spoken word.
Wait, he just spoke and everything popped into existence.
That's the idea. He uttered the names of things, and they came into being. The power of speech was incredibly important in Egyptian mythology.
That's incredible. So it wasn't a long, drawn-out process. No 7 days of creation here.
Nope. Just the sheer power of Ra's divine word bringing everything into being.
Wow. It's like the ultimate speak it into existence mantra. Are there any specific texts that describe this creation by speech?
Absolutely. The pyramid texts and coffin texts, they were super important for the ancient Egyptians.
Because they help them navigate the afterlife.
Exactly. They were like guides for the deceased, packed with spells and instructions for navigating the underworld.
So they were essentially roadmaps for the afterlife.
Right. And both of these texts feature Ra prominently. They describe him bringing forth life with his words, emphasizing his role as the ultimate creator.
So it wasn't just about creating the physical world, it was about the creation of life itself, even in the afterlife.
Exactly. Ra's power extended beyond this world and into the next. He wasn't just a creator god, he had power over life and death itself.
That's a lot of responsibility. And this theme of Ra's creative power, it's really emphasized in one of the most captivating Egyptian myths, his daily journey across the sky.
Ah, yes. The celestial commute. One of my favorite myths.
Me too. It's so vivid and action-packed. So how did the ancient Egyptians picture this journey?
Imagine this. Each morning, Ra is reborn from the eastern horizon in his glorious solar bark.
Hold on, solar bark. Like some kind of divine yacht?
You could say that. It's basically a boat, but fit for a god, all decked out with symbols and carrying Ra and his crew across the heavens.
Talk about traveling in style. So Ra sails across the sky, bringing light and life to the world. But what happens when the sun sets?
Well, as the sun sets, he descends into Duat, the underworld. And let me tell you, things get a little dicey down there. It's not all smooth sailing.
Underworld adventures. I'm intrigued. What kind of trouble is Ra getting into down there?
His biggest enemy is the serpent Apophis, who's basically this giant embodiment of chaos.
Chaos serpent. Sounds fun.
Fun is one word for it. This serpent wants to do nothing less than swallow the sun and plunge the world into eternal darkness. Can you imagine?
That would put a damper on things. So every night, it's this epic showdown between Ra, the bringer of light, and Apophis, the force of darkness. Good versus evil, right?
It's exactly that, but it's even bigger than that. It's also about order versus chaos. Remember, the Egyptians were all about Ma'at, maintaining cosmic order and balance.
Right, Ma'at. So Ra's nightly battle is about more than just light and dark. It's about the fundamental struggle to maintain order in the universe. Pretty high stakes.
High stakes indeed. And every time Ra overcomes Apophis, it guarantees that the sun will rise again, that life will continue, that order will prevail. It was a powerful reminder that even in the face of chaos, there is always hope.
So much meaning packed into a nightly commute. But it's also a reminder of this cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth, right?
Absolutely. Ra's journey through the underworld and his return each morning symbolize this eternal cycle, a cycle that was central to the Egyptian worldview.
It's like the sun setting and rising each day is a reflection of the larger cycles of life and death, beginnings and endings that we all experience.
Exactly. And this concept is key to understanding not only Ra's story, but also their beliefs about the afterlife. But we'll dive into that a bit later.
I'm already hooked. Okay, so we've talked about Ra's falcon-headed image. Were there any other ways the ancient Egyptians depicted him?
Sometimes he was also depicted with a ram's head, which emphasized his power and fertility.
So they used different animal imagery to highlight different aspects of his power.
Right. And remember that solar disk he wears? It's often encircled by a serpent, symbolizing protection, but also the endless cycle of time.
Every detail has a meaning. It's like a visual code. What about the scarab beetle? I always see that associated with Ra, too.
Yes. Khepri. The scarab beetle was connected to the rising sun and the idea of rebirth.
Because they saw the scarab beetles rolling those balls of dung, and it reminded them of the sun's movement across the sky.
Exactly. They observed nature and found these beautiful connections to their beliefs. And don't forget the ankh.
Oh yes, the ankh, that symbol of life, often depicted in Ra's hands.
It represented his power to bestow life and immortality. It's a powerful image that really encapsulates his essence.
It's amazing how these symbols have lasted for centuries.
Mm.
We still recognize them today, even though we might not fully grasp their original meaning.
They have this timeless power, don't they? But it wasn't just through images that Ra's presence was felt. People encountered him every day through his worship.
Right. Temples, rituals, offerings. Let's talk about the widespread devotion dedicated to Ra. It must have been pretty intense.
It was. You can't talk about Ra without mentioning Heliopolis, the city of the sun. It was like Ra's central command, his headquarters on Earth.
Heliopolis, home to some very powerful priests who meticulously maintained his worship.
Exactly. They orchestrated these elaborate rituals, offerings, hymns, you name it, all designed to honor and please Ra.
And those towering obelisks, weren't those connected to Ra too?
Absolutely. They were seen as symbols of Ra, channeling the sun's rays and representing the Benben stone, the primordial mound from which Ra created the world.
It's incredible how they incorporated their beliefs into their architecture, creating these visual reminders of Ra's power and presence.
It was a way of making the divine tangible, bringing those cosmic forces down to earth.
And of course, the pharaohs, believed to be the living embodiment of Ra, played a crucial role in all of this.
Oh, absolutely. Their connection to Ra was fundamental to their authority and legitimacy. They were seen as his representatives on Earth, responsible for maintaining cosmic order and upholding Ma'at.
Ma'at, that concept of truth, balance, and cosmic order. So it wasn't just about worshiping Ra for good weather or a bountiful harvest. It was about aligning yourself with this cosmic principle.
Exactly. It was a way of life, a moral code that extended to every aspect of Egyptian society.
So the pharaohs, as Ra's representatives, were tasked with upholding Ma, ensuring justice, and maintaining balance in the world.
It was a heavy responsibility. They were the link between the divine and the human, and their actions had consequences for the entire cosmos.
Talk about pressure. It's amazing how religion and politics were so intertwined in ancient Egypt. But speaking of intertwining, you mentioned earlier that Ra was sometimes fused with other deities, creating these combined forms. What's that all about?
Ah, yes, the syncretism of Egyptian mythology. It's one of the things that makes it so fascinating.
It's like a divine mashup.
Exactly. One of the most notable examples is Amun-Ra. Amun was the chief god of Thebes, and as Thebes gained power, their god kind of got promoted.
So it's like a divine reflection of the shifting political landscape.
Exactly. Amun-Ra represented the supreme god, this fusion of solar power with the authority of the king of the gods. It reflected the evolving religious landscape and the merging of different belief systems.
It's fascinating how they adapted their mythology to reflect the changing world around them. And then there's Ra-Harakti.
Ah, yes, Ra-Harakti, a combination of Ra and Horus, the falcon god of kingship.
So two falcon gods merging into one super falcon god.
You could say that. He's often depicted with a falcon head and the solar disk, symbolizing this union of solar power and royal authority.
It's interesting how they use these combined forms to express complex ideas and relationships between the gods. But we've also seen how Ra wasn't just confined to the realm of the divine. He influenced their art, architecture, even their understanding of cosmic order.
Right. His reach was vast, impacting every aspect of their lives. Remember Ma'at. That concept of cosmic order was central to their worldview.
And Ra, as the upholder of this cosmic order, was intrinsically linked to it. So it wasn't just about worshiping Ra for personal gain. It was about aligning yourself with this greater principle of truth and balance.
Exactly. It was about living in harmony with the universe, recognizing that our actions have consequences.
And the pharaohs, as Ra's representatives, were responsible for maintaining this balance, right?
Absolutely. It was their divine duty. And you can see this reflected in Egyptian art and architecture. Temples decorated with scenes from Ra's journey, statues depicting him in all his glory. It was everywhere.
Right. And of course, the Great Sphinx of Giza, that monumental lion with a human head.
Oh, yes. The Sphinx is often associated with Ra-Harakti, a majestic symbol of Ra's enduring power, his connection to kingship, and his watchful presence over the land.
It's a reminder that even though Ra's formal worship declined, his legacy lived on. His story was etched into the very landscape of Egypt.
And it's a story that continues to fascinate and inspire us today. But for now, I think it's time we take a quick break. When we get back, we'll delve into how Ra's story was rediscovered and reinterpreted and explore the lasting impact he's had on our understanding of ancient Egypt.
Sounds good to me. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back, everyone. Before the break, we were talking about the Great Sphinx, this incredible monument that's often linked to Ra-Harakti.
It really is an awe-inspiring sight, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's a great example of how Ra's legacy lived on even after his formal worship declined. But how exactly did his story survive through the centuries? I mean, we're talking about a god whose temples were shut down, his priests scattered, his entire belief system kind of fading away.
Well, it's important to remember that the study of ancient Egypt never really went away completely. There were always scholars and explorers fascinated by this civilization, and they couldn't help but stumble upon Ra's story. It was just everywhere.
It's like his presence was embedded in their culture, just waiting to be rediscovered.
Exactly. And then in the 19th and 20th centuries, something amazing happened. There was this huge surge in interest in ancient Egypt, fueled by all these incredible archaeological discoveries and breakthroughs in deciphering hieroglyphs.
It's like a whole new world opened up. Suddenly, we could read their texts, understand their art, and really get a glimpse into their beliefs and worldview.
Right. And as we unearth more about ancient Egypt, Ra's story came back into focus, revealing just how complex and influential he was. It was like putting together a giant puzzle, each new discovery adding another piece to the picture.
Like those New Kingdom tombs they discovered, filled with images of Ra and his journey through the underworld.
Exactly. Those tombs gave us incredible insights into how Ra was worshipped and how his myth was intertwined with their beliefs about the afterlife.
It's amazing how archaeology can bring the past to life, isn't it? It lets us connect with these ancient cultures in a tangible way.
It's true. And as we learn more about ancient Egypt, we also learn more about ourselves. These ancient myths offer us a way to explore timeless questions about creation, our place in the universe, the meaning of life and death.
They're not just stories, they're reflections of the human experience.
Exactly. And I think that's why Ra's story continues to resonate with us today. But, before we get too deep into that, I wanted to circle back to something we touched on earlier. The idea that other gods, like Osiris and Isis, played a role in the decline of Ra's popularity.
Right. It wasn't just about Christianity coming in and changing the religious landscape. It was also about these internal shifts within Egyptian religion itself.
Mm.
Why did people start gravitating towards those other gods? What did they offer that Ra didn't?
Well, Osiris and Isis in particular offered something different. They were more closely associated with themes of death, rebirth, and resurrection, ideas that resonated with people on a deeply personal level.
Death and rebirth, those are universal experiences, things that everyone can relate to no matter what culture or time period they live in.
Exactly. And Osiris especially had this incredible myth. It was a story of betrayal, death, and ultimately resurrection. It offered hope and comfort, especially when people were facing their own mortality.
I can see how that would be appealing. It's like they were looking for a god who understood their fears and anxieties about life and death, someone who had been through it themselves and come out on the other side.
Right. They wanted a connection with the divine that felt more personal, more accessible. And Osiris and Isis offered that. But it wasn't just about personal beliefs.
Right. We were talking about how the political and social changes happening within Egypt itself played a role in Ra's decline too.
Absolutely. Remember, as different cities and regions gained power, their local patron deities also rose in prominence. It was like a reflection of the political landscape playing out in the divine realm.
So as the power shifted on Earth, it also shifted in the heavens. It's like the gods were having their own power struggles.
You could say that. The rise of Thebes, for example, led to the elevation of their local god, Amun, who was eventually merged with Ra to create Amun-Ra, as we talked about earlier.
It's amazing how these shifts in religious beliefs often mirrored what was happening politically and socially at the time.
It really shows how interconnected these things are. But even though Ra's formal worship declined, the ancient Egyptians never entirely forgot about him. His story was preserved in their texts, their art, and their monuments.
And thanks to archaeology, we've been able to rediscover and re-examine his myth, uncovering all these layers of meaning and symbolism.
And that's what makes studying mythology so fascinating, isn't it? There's always more to uncover, more to learn. It's a journey of discovery that never really ends.
I couldn't agree more. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to one last aspect of Rose's story that we haven't really explored in depth: his nightly journey through the underworld.
Ah, yes. That perilous voyage through Duat, filled with all sorts of dangers and challenges. It's one of the most captivating parts of his myth.
We talked about how he battles the serpent Apophis each night, this epic struggle between light and darkness, order and chaos. But I'm curious, was it just a literal interpretation of the sun's disappearance at night? or did it represent something deeper?
It's definitely more than just a literal explanation. Remember, we were talking about how the idea of cyclical renewal was so central to the Egyptian worldview. They saw it in the Nile's floods, the changing seasons, even in the pharaoh's role in maintaining Mot.
Right. There was a pattern they observed in nature, a way of understanding the ebb and flow of life.
Exactly. And Ra's journey through the underworld is another expression of that same cyclical pattern. It's a metaphor for the constant cycle of beginnings and endings that we all experience in life.
The ups and downs, the challenges and triumphs, the darkness and the light. It's all part of the journey.
And just as Ra emerges from the underworld each morning, transformed and renewed, we too can emerge from our challenges stronger and more enlightened. It's a message of hope and resilience.
That's a powerful thought. It reminds me that even in the darkest of times, there's always the potential for growth and transformation. But I have to admit, it's also a little bit terrifying. I mean, imagine facing a giant chaos serpent every single night. That's a lot of pressure.
I know, right? But I think there's another layer of meaning there too. It's about facing our fears, embracing the unknown, and trusting that we have the strength to overcome any obstacle.
So Ra's journey is not just about passively accepting fate. It's about actively choosing to confront the darkness and knowing that we have the power to emerge victorious.
Exactly. And I think that's a really profound message. Sometimes we have to step outside of our comfort zones and face our fears head on. It's in those moments of darkness and challenge that we can discover our true strength and resilience.
I love that. It's a reminder that we all have that potential within us.
Absolutely. But how does this all relate to the Book of the Dead and the Litany of Ra, which we talked about earlier? Remember, the Book of the Dead was like a guide for navigating the afterlife, and the Litany of Ra was a powerful spell for invoking his protection and guidance.
So the ancient Egyptians were looking to Ra's myth, his journey through the underworld, as a model for their own experience in the afterlife.
Yeah.
They believed that by understanding Ra's struggles and triumphs, they could also find their way to eternal life.
Precisely. They saw Ra as the ultimate guide, the one who had navigated the darkness and emerged victorious, and they hoped to emulate his success.
It's amazing how they wove together these different aspects of their beliefs. Mythology, rituals, funerary practices, it's all interconnected, a tapestry of meaning and symbolism.
It's one of the things that makes studying ancient Egypt so captivating.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into Ra's world. What do you think are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is just how central Ra was to the ancient Egyptian worldview. He wasn't just a god, he was the source of everything, the embodiment of creation, order, and the cyclical nature of life itself. And even though his formal worship eventually declined, his story lived on, offering timeless wisdom and insights into the human experience.
It's a reminder that these ancient myths aren't just stories. They're reflections of who we are, where we come from, and the challenges and triumphs we face on our own journeys.
Beautifully put. They offer us a way to connect with something larger than ourselves, to find meaning and purpose in our lives, and to tap into our own inner strength and potential.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Ra, the sun god. It's been an incredible journey filled with fascinating insights and thought-provoking discussions.
It certainly has.
But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We've talked a lot about Ra's journey as a metaphor for our own lives, but there's one element that we haven't fully explored: his entourage.
Ah, yes, the gods and goddesses who accompanied him on his nightly voyage through the underworld.
Exactly. Who were these figures, and what did they represent? Could they offer us further insights into our own personal journeys, our own inner strengths and challenges?
That's a great question, and one that I think is worth exploring further. Perhaps it's something we can delve into in a future deep dive.
I like the sound of that. So to our listeners, we encourage you to continue your own exploration of ancient Egypt and the fascinating world of Ra, the sun god. There's always something new to discover.
And until next time, keep those minds curious and those imaginations ignited.
Thanks for joining us on this epic journey. Welcome back, everyone. It's amazing how much ground we've covered already in this deep dive into Ra's world. From his origins as this all-powerful creator god to his epic battles with the forces of chaos. It's like one big cosmic adventure.
It really is. And what's amazing is that even though we're talking about a god whose formal worship faded away centuries ago, his story continues to resonate with us today. It's like these ancient myths tap into something universal, something timeless about the human experience.
I completely agree. It's like those myths are speaking to us across time, offering wisdom and insights that are still relevant today.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, what is it about these ancient stories that continues to fascinate us? Why do we keep coming back to them?
That's a great question, and one that I think we'll be exploring for a long time to come. But, before we wrap up this deep dive, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, something that really piqued my curiosity.
What's that?
Remember when we were talking about Ra's journey through the underworld? You mentioned his entourage, those figures who accompanied him on his nightly voyage?
Yes, Ra's crew. They weren't just along for the ride, they were an essential part of his journey, representing different aspects of his power and the forces he had to contend with.
Right. And, I was thinking about that, and it occurred to me that maybe there's something more to those figures. I mean, could they also be seen as representing different aspects of our own journeys, our own internal strengths and challenges?
That's a fascinating way to look at it. It's like Ra's entourage is the symbolic representation of the different qualities and resources we need to draw on as we navigate the complexities of life.
Exactly. So tell me more. Who were some of the key members of Ra's crew, and what might they represent in terms of our own personal journeys?
Well, one of the most important figures was Sia, the god of perception and knowledge. He was often depicted as a man with a papyrus roll on his head, symbolizing his wisdom and understanding.
So Sia represents the importance of knowledge and insight, those qualities that help us make sense of the world around us.
Precisely. He embodies that idea that we need clarity and understanding to navigate the challenges of life, just like Ra needed Sia's guidance to navigate the underworld.
It's like having a wise mentor or guide to help us along the way, to show us the path when things get dark and confusing.
Exactly. And then there was Hu, the god of creative utterance. He's often depicted with a frog's head, symbolizing his connection to the primordial waters of Nun, where creation began.
Ah, yes, none, that chaotic void from which everything emerged. So Hu represents the power of creation, the spoken word, the ability to bring things into being through our thoughts and expressions.
You got it. He embodies that ancient Egyptian belief that words have power, that we can actually shape our reality through what we say and how we think.
That's incredible. It's like Ra needs Hugh's creative force to overcome the obstacles he faces in the underworld. And we, too, can use our creative energy to overcome challenges and manifest our dreams and desires in this world.
Exactly. It's about tapping into that creative spark within us, that potential to shape and transform our reality.
This is so cool. It's like we're uncovering this whole new layer of meaning in Ra's myth. It's not just about his journey. It's about the qualities and resources he needs to succeed, the team he assembles. And those qualities and resources, well, they're within us too.
I'm loving this. It's like we're cracking the code of this ancient myth, uncovering its hidden wisdom and applying it to our own lives.
And there's one more figure you mentioned, the god of magic.
Ah, yes. Heka, the god of magic. He was seen as this primordial force, the power that animated the universe, the magic that made everything possible.
Magic. So Heka represents the potential for transformation, the ability to access those hidden forces within us and use them to shape our destinies.
That's it. He embodies that idea that there's more to this world than meets the eye, that there are hidden powers and possibilities just waiting to be unlocked. And just as Ra needed Heka's magic to navigate the underworld, we too can tap into those hidden resources within ourselves to overcome challenges and create the life we desire.
I love this. It's like the ancient Egyptians understood that we all have this incredible potential within us, this spark of magic that can help us achieve anything we set our minds to.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we are more powerful than we realize.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We started with Ra, the sun god, and ended up exploring everything from creation and cosmic order to the afterlife, the power of words, the magic of transformation, and the importance of assembling the right team to support us on our journey. It's like this ancient myth has become a blueprint for navigating life's challenges and unlocking our full potential.
It's been an amazing journey, and it just goes to show how these ancient myths continue to offer us wisdom and guidance, even thousands of years later.
So to our listeners, we hope this deep dive into Ra's world has inspired you to embrace your own inner strength, tap into your creative potential, and remember that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope for transformation and renewal.
And until next time, keep those minds curious, keep those imaginations ignited, and keep exploring.
Thanks for joining us.